What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Neo Starling, and I am back here with another podcast. Now, as you could see from the title of the video, we are going to indeed be speaking about boundaries today. Now, what is a boundary? A boundary is essentially an invisible line that you do not cross, right? It is a verbal agreement with another individual that certain things that make you uncomfortable are not to come to pass, and vice versa. Why is this important? Why are boundaries so important to people? And why is it that no one could ever seem to come to a consensus of what a boundary actually is? Well, dear viewer, it's because we live in a day and age where we are flooded with information, right? Social media feeds, instant gratification. We get to points where we are consuming so much information that sometimes we don't know what the correct information is. You might think you're getting the correct information, but what indeed you're actually getting is a plethora of different perspectives and opinions that are indeed clouded based off of their own personal biases, their ideologies, their political leanings, or whatever the case may be. The point is, dear viewer, that if you are listening to this podcast, I am hopefully going to give you my perspective on what I personally believe a boundary is. And we will be providing examples, because one thing that I feel gets lost in the shuffle when these things are indeed discussed is that proper examples aren't utilized. There's just a bunch of vague communications. I didn't like this person's energy. Tell me if you've heard that one before. Or, my peace was disturbed. Well, how was your peace disturbed? Can you provide an example? Can you indeed tell me how your peace was shattered and thrown away into the dust, into oblivion by said individual? Because only through understanding and using simple language can we actually properly convey what a boundary is and how it is in fact bothering you. So let's use some examples, right? So when I was a kid, I can remember feeling very uncomfortable when my friends, or quote unquote friends, would mention the fact that because I was poor, I used to get a lot of hand-me-down clothes from my brother. And there was one friend in particular, I'm not going to say his name, but he used to say one size too small. Just one size too small every time I wore something that was a hand-me-down. And I remember it bothering me a lot, man. I just remember thinking to myself, damn, I don't have money. I am not as fortunate as some of these people that I'm growing up with. Why am I being made fun of? Why am I being made to feel guilty for my current socioeconomic status? I wasn't aware of this stuff at the time as a kid. I had to rely on the kindness and financial support of my mom because I came from a single mother household and I didn't have a father. I had father figures growing up, quote unquote, if you really could call them that. But the point of the story is that it really bothered me, man. It really did. I remember always thinking to myself, you know what? When I get older, when I become an adult, I'm going to bust my ass and make sure that I never have one size too small. I want to make sure things fit me properly, because this was one of those things that at the time I had no control over. Why am I using this story as an example? The reason, dear viewer, is because I was not able to articulate at that time to this individual that, hey, this really bothers me. It hurts my feelings. Now maybe he knew to an extent, because I wouldn't say he was like a dum-dum. He was a fairly intelligent individual for the time. But we kind of just joked on each other. That was sort of the nature of us growing up as friends. Young boys do that to each other a lot, or we kind of just jab each other with a lot of jokes, which is why I have yet to hear an insult as an adult that has bothered me as much as when I was a kid. Because trust me, when I was a kid, man, it really blew. But the point is that I never told them that it bothered me. And that in itself bothered me, because that should have been a firm boundary. I should have been like, hey, man, you know what? Stop saying this shit. It hurts my feelings. And ooh, boo-hoo feelings, right? Men have feelings. Yes, you, viewer, the one watching this video, if you are a man, I guarantee you have feelings, and they are there. They're real. They exist. And for you to pretend and ignore them you're just going to go nuts, So let's stop pretending that we don't have feelings, because we do. Especially as kids, we're more hyper emotional than we are when we're older, right? Now, I went off on a little bit of a feelings tangent there, but let me rewind it back. So if I would have told him that, hey man, this really bothers me, if I would have pulled him to the side and genuinely had a real conversation with him and explained the situation, then maybe he would have stopped, right? Or maybe not. He probably would have doubled down. Who knows? But it really did bother me, and I regret not telling him that, right? But that's okay. We're gonna move on, because obviously I grew up and I'm okay, And boundaries are a really funny thing when you stop and think about it, because there are times that just because they're not explained properly, or there's so many definitions for what a boundary is, people can often get confused and not know when they are violating one of those said boundaries. You know what I mean? Let's use emotional boundaries, for example, because this is a subcategory that falls under the same umbrella of what it is, right? Now, what's an emotional boundary? Let's say you're protecting your feelings, you're avoiding codependency on other people. What if you are in a relationship with someone and that person doesn't have the same connection to you that you have towards them? Now, what do I mean by that connection? I don't mean that they love you less, but maybe this individual that you're with appreciates their solo time a little bit, and they need that solo time once in a while to recharge. And you could be someone that's extremely clingy and needy and needs to be around them 24/7, and they're your only friend and the only person you ever hang out with. Well, that's just horrible. I don't really think that should be a thing. And maybe those things need to be established, and there has to be a conversation had, because this is what I find often happens in relationships. You're going to hear a lot of different things on the internet, but I feel that this is a good rule of thumb that we can all follow in general when it comes to relationships and boundaries. Okay? You can't say that before you get with this person, establish all your boundaries in the beginning, because if they break that boundary, then you have the right to leave. You have the right to say, no, this is not what I believe. You messed up. Now I'm outie. Okay? That's not the way it works. You have to give it time. Okay? When you get with someone in the beginning, you are meeting their ambassador. You do not fully understand who said individual is yet. They are showing you a representation of what they believe you would like to see in order for them to acquire you as their mate. Okay? So if there are certain things that bother you about this person, they're not going to be evident in the beginning. And for you to splurge and just say, if you're going to spurg out and say a billion different things that, hey, this is a boundary A, B, C, D, before anything ever happens, if you want to pop the balloon show, you're going to get your balloon popped right away. Now, why is that happening? Because you're emotionally dumping and trauma dumping 150 things that bother you right away to someone that you just met. So you can't realistically expect them to take that well. There has to be time. You have to spend time with each other. There have to be established conversations with each other. Let's say, for instance, you've been dating for several months and your girlfriend dresses extremely revealing and you don't like that. Well, dear viewer, you can have a conversation about that. And it's okay to have that conversation. Whether or not she agrees with you and says, you know what, I kind of like dressing like a slut. Why don't you piss off? If she says that, then move on and keep it moving, and don't put yourself in a situation where you're going to deal with this because you're afraid of losing this person, right? If that's a boundary that you have where you don't want to have your partner dressing extremely revealing, now have a conversation about that. Don't just say flat out, I hate this because I don't want you to dress this way. No, you sit down and say, hey, look, there are several things that I've seen from my own personal experience and that bother me when it comes to someone that overly reveals themselves. Let's say, for instance, if you're like that on social media, you might get a lot of unnecessary attention. There are stalkers that could possibly start hounding you, or let's say, for instance, you're walking outside in the street and, other men start catcalling you while you're walking with your girl. That's unnerving and it's uncomfortable. It puts you on the defensive. Do you say something to them? Do you ignore it and keep it moving? There's a ton of different things that are going to test you in your relationship. And using the example of someone dressing provocatively is certainly a conversation that should happen at some point. You can compromise. Hey, if your butt cheeks are showing out of your shorts every time we're walking around, well, maybe, add a couple of inches to those shorts and boom, you can still wear your shorts, but your cheeks aren't hanging out. And you know what? If the lady tells you, hey man, you know what? I don't really like that because I feel that you're trying to control the way I'm dressing. Well, you know what? She's fully within her reason and her right to say that to you. And you are also fully in your right to say, well, you know what? I don't like that. And if this is something that you're going to do, then we don't have to continue this relationship. We can keep it casual, or we could just, go in our own separate corners of the world. Now, if you're listening to this and this offends you of the idea that she should be able to wear whatever she wants for the 3 women that listen to my podcast, if this offends you, I need you to understand that it is well within his right to not want that. And it's also well within your right to want to dress that way. Because relationships are about compromise at the end of the day, right? That is why you have these conversations with each other, because you can't just get with someone and say, well, this is how you met me, so you have to accept me. No, you don't. You don't have to accept that, because the same way you would have certain expectations of me if I am with you, the same rule applies, right? So it's disingenuous. And you know what? The same can apply. I don't want to feel like I'm attacking the ladies here, because honestly, the guys have their issues as well. Let's say, for example, you have a ton of female friends, right? You just talk to a bunch of women. You always hang out with them. You go drinking with them every other day. You have sleepovers at their house. And, it's just how you are. Now, if you're a woman, you could tell your man, hey, you know what? I kind of don't like that. I don't like you having so many female friends. She can tell you that, and you could say, well, these were my friends and I was with them before we ever got together, so I don't see what the problem is. But if she were to express herself to you and say, well, this makes me uncomfortable because typically when you put men and women in a situation with alcohol, your state of mind, you could become inebriated and you're more liable to make mistakes and you could possibly be endangering the relationship. Now, that is up to you ultimately, once more, whether that's something you want to eat the cost of or not. You could say, hey, maybe tone it down a little bit, or you can go out with them, but don't sleep over at their house, because if you do that, you're presenting a possible opportunity for something sexual to escalate, right? And you know what? That's vice versa for the women. If you got a whole bunch of guy friends, maybe your boyfriend doesn't appreciate that either. Now, again, the reason we are saying these things, they are not insecurities by any stretch of the imagination, because these things have happened and will probably happen inevitably in the future with enough time, because all these things happen. A man and a woman can at any point mess up and step out or break a boundary of their partner that can be an unforgivable one, that you could say, hey, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. Just realize that there's a difference between expressing yourself in a healthy way versus an unhealthy way. If you just yell at your partner and say, I don't like this, and that's that, well, you don't own them as a person and they don't own you. So you are well within your right to eject from the situation. But if you sit down and have a rational, normal conversation, you can establish why said things bother you. We could even make it simpler, right? Let's say you're a super cleanly person and you like your environment to be nice and neat. And now that you moved in with your partner is the complete polar opposite. You are diametrically opposed when it comes to your methods of cleaning. I like to wash my dishes when I'm done eating, right? I just like having my environment clean. I don't want to have a messy place. When I have a messy environment, my mind is fogged and I have a difficult time properly getting things done. That's just how my mind works, and that's okay. So I like to clean up. And if I have a messy environment, it bothers me. So if I tell my girl or my guy friends, right, because it doesn't have to just be relationships, this could be friendships too. Let's use the guys as examples, because I've had roommates in the past that have been rather messy. And I would express to them, hey, this bothers me, man. You don't have any maids here. You should be able to wash your own dishes when you're done cooking. And it was a little rough in the beginning, but eventually I got through to them, because if you're not able to have honest conversations, if you're not willing to hurt the feelings of the people around you, then you don't really care, because you can't just constantly hype somebody up without bringing them back down to reality. If you care about your friends or your partner or your family, you have to let them know when something that they're doing is wrong. And through having these talks, I was able to get my roommates to be neater people, because why should we live in a dirty environment? Why should the neutral area, the neutral zone, where everyone gets together to have fun or just chit chat with each other, why should it be compromised? Why should it be a mess, right? So make sure that you establish that. Have these conversations. And you know what? They're going to be uncomfortable, okay? Because setting boundaries is uncomfortable. But you have to let them know specifically why something bothers you, okay? You can't be vague about it. Don't just say, hey, man, you know what? Your energy was just off today and I don't appreciate that. What does that mean? What does your energy being off mean? It doesn't mean shit, okay? It doesn't mean anything. Tell them, explain it to them, make them understand your perspective, okay? And in turn, you do the same. Yeah, because boundaries go both ways, okay? No matter who you're with, no matter what you're doing, no matter who you're seeing, no matter who your friends or family are, there are going to be certain things that can possibly bother you about them and vice versa. And if you're not willing to have these conversations with them, then there shouldn't be a connection with this person to begin with. So if I want to rewind this back to the beginning where I said, when you go on a date with somebody in the beginning, don't trauma dump them with boundaries right away. The reason I'm saying that is because you're not always going to know what a boundary should be with this person until you proceed with the relationship. And you know what? People are a lot more reasonable than I think we give them credit for. I think if we're able to sit down with people and properly convey why something bothers us, we can get a positive response out of it. But if you never take the opportunity, if you never take the time to properly let somebody know why something is bothering you, well, then you're breaking your own boundaries at that point, because you know this bothers you and you're not saying anything. So, dear viewers, I think I've harped on long enough about this. I just wanted to kind of touch up upon this because, social media is really funny nowadays, and we got a ton of different videos of men and women alike giving their perspectives, and some of these things are like just downright ridiculous, and some of them are really good and make sense. So I'm hoping to be somewhere in the middle where I can let you know that it's okay to express your boundary, even if it's ridiculous, but express it nonetheless, okay? But also be willing for the repercussions of that. Be willing to lose your friends or family or a significant other based off of said boundary, because it is going to happen. And if you're really honest with yourself, it would be the same way if you broke their boundaries, because we're people, man. We're not perfect. But with that said, if you feel that you've gained any value from this video, from this podcast, please feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, do the damn thing, help your brother out. It's 2025. I want to grow this platform. I'm sick of not being monetized. I want to grow, and hopefully we can all grow together. But with that said, you are all awesome, and don't ever, ever let anyone tell you different. Signing off.